when I was doing all the juicing, I developed scalp psoriasis.
Mm.
So how could this be? I'm juicing, I'm healthy.
And it takes
And I've
so
had,
long to realize what you're doing wrong. Like you can't imagine. And that's what
yeah.
people say to me. How can fruits and vegetables be bad for us? Hey guys, thank you so much for watching our videos. If you'd like to support us some more, you can explore our homemade natural skincare products at purelytallow.com. Thank you so much for supporting my small business. Hey guys, welcome to the Carnivore Revolution. I'm Serena, and my guest today is Colleen DeFrancesco. Colleen has been a carnivore for almost 2 years, and we're going to get her story and find out how much better she feels having eaten only animal products for that long. So Colleen, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time. I know it's hard to schedule things so far out. You never know what's going to happen that day, and you just kind of have to hope it works out. So
Yes.
let's start with your story and how you became a carnivore. What made you try something so extreme, and how has that affected you?
Yeah, so good question. It's kind of a loaded question. I have a very long story, but to
Okay.
get to the carnivore part, it's interesting how I became carnivore because I was so plant-based and I was so in the plant-based community and world.
Yes.
And
Well, we
so
want that whole story. We want your whole story. We want, like, go as far back as you want. Don't feel like you can't tell the whole story.
Okay. I'll try and do the clip. I actually even wrote like down like a bulleted list here. Like so if you see me like looking at my,
Okay.
because I don't want to, I want to be as concise and as possible without rambling
Okay.
and taking up too much time. But there is kind of a history there. So growing up my whole life, standard American diet. You know, I grew up as a 90s kid, so everything colorful and everything toxic. And so I did have a lot of autoimmune issues. Now that I can look back at my life with a clear head and knowing everything, I could see and cringe at everything I used to eat. And it was all sorts of junk food. And so I did have autoimmune type of issues. I got sick very easily, very prone to sinus infections. But by the time I was a teenager, I developed mono, and so I had Epstein-Barr. So that right there was a predisposition for MS to begin with. And I developed chronic, if this is TMI, but I developed chronic constipation by the time I was in my, just from like just eating so poorly. My mother, at least I give my mother credit, she did used to make home cooked meals. So I at least had that.
Yeah.
But the rest of my diet was always, you know, junky, like junky kid food. So fast forward to the time I was about 25, I watched, you probably hear this a lot, I watched a documentary, and it was like a vegan type of documentary, and it
Been there,
really,
done that.
yeah, I figured. So it sucked me in. I feel like this is like the classic story with everybody. It sucked me in, and I started making as many green smoothies as I possibly could. And because I noticed how that helped with my chronic constipation, that for me, that was like a motivator, like, this is the best thing for me. This is my cure. And so I went with it. Within like 2 to 3 years, I developed kidney stones and thyroid nodules. I don't know if it's directly caused by that. I won't make any crazy claims, but I find that interesting because I now know about oxalates and things like that. So like I said, in my new life, my carnivore life, and with my carnivore education, I'm able to like look back on all these things and connect dots. Yes. So that I connect that. I can't make any bold claims that it directly caused it, but I find it interesting that within a few years of going mostly plant-based, I developed kidney stones and thyroid nodules. And I even had a hospitalization one time from food poisoning from like a bad batch of spinach or kale. It was one of the greens were bad. Yeah. So I ended up in the hospital for like a few days. It was pretty bad. My gut health was terrible. I always had gut health issues. I was always prone, even from a kid, prone to like stomach problems. Around the age of like 27, 28, I started noticing I was mostly plant-based. I started noticing bad skin, like my skin was breaking out a lot. So I was doing a lot of research to find out like, what could I do to clear up my skin? I don't want to have bad skin like this. And so that's when I stumbled across the vegan world. And I kind of went down that rabbit hole. And I discovered somebody who did this diet that was like you eat mostly raw. It's called Raw Till 4. And so I did that. I did not even last a year. I did go like strict vegan because I wanted to clear up my skin and I wanted to heal up like my immune system too and other issues. Right. And people claimed that this was
that's how you do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? That's how you do it.
Everyone was saying this is how you do it. So, you know, when you want to do something, you do it. So I did attempt to go full vegan, and it was mostly raw vegan. I would eat raw vegan all day with like tons of fruits. And then for my dinner, I could eat a cooked meal. That was what this plan was. And that's what I was following. And it was horrible. The stomach, the bloat, the pain, the gas. It was, it was like semi-traumatizing. It was so bad. At one point I'm a teacher. So I'd be at work and I do small group pull out, and there was like a divider in our room, and behind the divider was a table. I literally would have to lay down on the table at work some days because the gas pain was so bad that like I wouldn't even be able to stand upright. I had to lay down to try and get the gas out. It was horrible. So crazy. I didn't even last a year doing that. It was just too painful and too uncomfortable. So I lasted about seven months, maybe, if that, doing that. So then I went back to like my mainly plant-based way again. And I'm embarrassed to say this, but I was mostly plant-based, but because of the brain, I always love steak. Like I naturally love meat, eggs, bacon. I naturally love all of that stuff. So at this stage, I would have a steak here and there. So even so, I know a lot of the vegans and the plant-based people will be like, well, you didn't do it fully. And it's like, well, I did, but I had like the pain pushed me out of it.
Yeah. Don't be embarrassed by that. I mean, your body was telling you needed those things.
Oh,
honestly,
yeah.
right?
Well, I'm embarrassed now to say that I treated steak I treated steak at this stage as a cheat food. So I'm like, now that I'm full carnivore, I'm embarrassed to say at one time I treated steak like a cheat food. So I would eat mostly plant-based. I went back to being mostly plant-based, but then like going out to nice restaurants, I'd order a filet. And that was like, oh, well, I ate good all week, so this is my cheat. And that's how I treated it because of the programming and like the brainwashing of like red meat is so bad for you. And so I did that. I still struggled with all sorts of, hormone issues, thyroid issues, and all sorts of autoimmune type of symptoms, fatigue, some brain fog. And so I was always on the search for like, how do I get myself to feel better? Like, how do I get myself to feel better? So fast forward to the summer of 2017. And the irony in all this is I was working for a plant-based company. So I was working for, it was like a plant-based MLM type of company. And I was accompanying my mother to her chiropractic appointment. And the irony is the reason why I was even going with her to this appointment is because she was like, my chiropractor is all into like that plant-based stuff. So maybe he would, want to buy some of this. So I was like, oh, so I was kind of going there for like a plant-based sales pitch. And while there, so my MS story involves what I believe a neck injury. It's controversial, but I believe that a neck injury plays a role in my MS. So anyway, I'm there to pitch this plant-based company. And while there, he asked, do you want me to adjust you? And I just thought, sure, why not? My gut instinct told me not to like let him touch my neck. I don't know. And that always sticks out to me, that I remember saying that to myself, but I just was like, stop being ridiculous. Just do it. Like everybody gets adjusted. So I got adjusted. I left there. I was fine. He did crack my neck. The next day I woke up like incapacitated. Like it was like my brain, like I actually had to like think, was I in a car accident? Did I take a drug that I don't remember taking, like what happened to me, because I could hardly get out of bed. I only could get out to go to the bathroom, and I would like had to scale the wall to even go to the bathroom to keep me upright, because I was so disoriented. I was so dizzy. I was so fogged. I could hardly open my eyes. It was horrible. Yeah, it felt like I had been in like a terrible accident minus all like the body pain. So it's hard for me not to connect that to the neck manipulation. But it is controversial. I could tell you right now that my MS specialist does not believe there's any connection. But I have found other people and other doctors who do think there is a possible connection. Most doctors will say absolutely no connection. But for transparency reasons, I always put that in there because I do believe it's connected. So there's an explosion of all these symptoms. After that neck adjustment, I'm bedbound for days. It took me days to finally like come around, and I had to go on an amphetamine to like just get things firing up there to function, so I didn't lose my job, so I could function. Yeah. It was crazy. And so I did see an ENT at that time, because the symptoms that I was describing, people were like, oh, you have vertigo, so you got to see an ENT. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe it's just vertigo and it could get fixed. So I did all the ENT testing. None of it came back, everything came back normal. He sent me immediately for an MRI. So this was like a month maybe after the incident. And he did send me for an MRI because he did not like that this came directly after a neck adjustment. He knows of like strokes and things that can happen. So he wanted me to go for an MRI to get checked out to make sure I didn't have a stroke, which was like, wow, I didn't know that. I would not have let anybody touch my neck. The MRI came back, what he says is clear. It was pretty clear. However, there did say that there was slight white matter changes, which is usually but there was no full-blown MS lesions at this point. So I'm thinking, okay, my MRI is clear. Well, then like, I just got to go resume my life. And I had to do that on an amphetamine. I had to go on Adderall. I could not have kept my job again without that. It was brutal. And then like the symptoms did lighten up. They got a little better with time. So enough so I can resume my life for the most part, but it just was never the same. Oh, and I do want to make a point to say that it was after that adjustment too, that the heat, I had a heat, that my very first shower after that adjustment was when I almost fainted taking the shower because of the heat. And that, heat intolerance, I came to find out, I didn't know this at the time, is a very prominent MS symptom. Mm-hmm. And I had no idea. So I didn't even know what this was. I was like, what is this that all of us, and I always I like taking baths. So if I would be taking a bath or I'd be in the shower, I would start to feel like I'm going to faint. Mm-hmm. And I never felt that prior to the adjustment. So that was really weird. I didn't know what that was. And until literally I found out about MS, then I was able to identify what that was. That whole time, like, right, I had no idea what that was that I was experiencing, right, whenever I would heat it up. And exercising too. Whenever I would exercise and get my body temperature up, I feel like this dizziness and like this disorientation, like I'm going to faint. So, so that summer passes, I go back to work, I get pregnant with my son, and which thank God, he was the best thing that ever happened to me. And believe it or not, and this is very common with MS, the symptoms got a lot more manageable through pregnancy and breastfeeding. And I through pregnancy, I was not as clean eating. I kind of threw caution to the wind and just ate whatever I wanted. I did eat a lot of like sugary things. I craved a lot of sweets. I got gestational diabetes. Oh no. Which, funny enough, the doctor I was like, how did this happen? And he's like, diet has nothing to do with it. The doctor told me. What? He said diet had, I said, am I eating? Because I was eating a lot of I was craving a lot of sweets, and I was eating a lot of sweets. I was like, is it because I was eating so much Fruit Loops and sugary cereals and tasty cake? And he's like, no, diet has absolutely nothing to do with this.
Insane.
Like, yeah. I look back at that now and I'm like, oh my gosh, if I only knew.
Yes, if we only knew. That's what I say too. If I only knew.
Yes. I wish, but can't take it back. but I still was having a lot of green smoothies and, I still was doing that. So like I said, through the breastfeeding process too, I was actually pretty like shockingly pretty good. The disorientation in my head never fully went away, but I handled, postpartum really well. And I was so blessed and lucky for that. But when I stopped breastfeeding, I guess like hormones shifted and changes, and there was an explosion of symptoms. Now at this point, I still was like not eating. I will admit, I was pretty plant-based, but not eating that all that clean. And I would drink wine, and so I didn't do everything perfectly. And explosion of symptoms. I remember laying down one day, like in the middle of the day, feeling like I was dying. And I was like, what is wrong with me? Like I feel like I'm dying. Like I just feel like I'm being poisoned to death. And at this stage, someone brought to my attention that my symptoms resembled breast implant illness, and I had breast implants. So, so I went ahead and got those taken out, thinking that would be my answer and I'd feel a lot better. And initially, I did feel like pretty good. Like right after the surgery, I really thought that was my answer. For like a solid week, I felt great. And I don't regret taking them out. I mean, they are a source of inflammation. This is a foreign object, so I don't regret taking them out. But it was not my answer. Symptoms came back, and then from there, I went back to work, and I just struggled so much with all the old symptoms: the fatigue, the disorientation, the horrible brain fog, debilitating brain fog. And I went on this mission to just reaching all over the place. What could I do? So I revved up the plants. I watched a juicing documentary. I started juicing like a maniac. It was like a juice factory in my kitchen. Yeah. I got into like the medical medium stuff. So I went down the celery juice rabbit hole. I was celery juicing multiple times a day. I would juice every morning, having the celery juice. I had a terrible reaction to the celery juice, and I kept just hearing that it was detox, detox, detox. So in hopes that it really was detox, I mean, I carried that on for like, it's embarrassing again, for like over a year. I think over a year I did that, heavy, heavy juicing. And the reason why I kept it again is because initially I did see some like benefit with when I would drink a fresh juice. I feel like it would give me a little bit of clarity, lift a little bit of the fog. But then I didn't realize this. I got sent on a blood sugar roller coaster. So I would I'd be like, okay, for like a window, and then I would crash so hard and feel like I was dying. So I did that for a long time. And then
I did that too, just so you know, you're not alone. I forced my family to drink celery juice every morning for weeks, maybe months. I would go ahead and I would juice, and I had these bags I could freeze it in, and I would put it in the freezer, and then I would set it out to thaw when we would go running, and so we could have it as soon as we came home. I mean, I was all about the juicing, 21-day juice fast. I mean, I loved juicing. Didn't know it was probably making me sick.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Well, you make me feel better because I was like a maniac with my juicing. I was so extreme with it because when you don't feel, like if you don't feel good, you're like desperate you'll do anything to feel better when you're desperate. So that was me. I was so desperate to feel better. I was willing to do anything. And I thought, like, looks like, people claim that they feel so much better from juicing. So I'll cleanse my body, and my immune system should get better too, because all the plant juices. Well, my immune system actually got worse. So that was very telling. And I should have taken that as a big signal, but I didn't. Like I found myself catching everything and anything. And even my blood, like when I fast forward to got my blood work first done for when I did get diagnosed with MS and have my blood work panel was my immune numbers, like the stuff that shows like your immune system, like the monocytes and lymphocytes and all that. It was terrible. And I was like, wow, here I was doing all this juicing to fix my immune system, because my whole life I had a terrible, really low immune system, got sick so easily. And I was hoping that would also solve that. And I'm like, how could my immune system be this bad when I primarily drink plant juice? And I still wasn't like connecting. So I did I did all the detoxes and protocols. And so fast forward, I went to another chiropractor to kind of tell them my story of like my crazy, like the really bad brain symptoms when they started, and see if like there really is a connection. She was like, I've never heard of this. Like, this is really crazy. She, have you had a neck MRI done? And I'm like, no, I've never. The ENT did a brain MRI, and it seemed clear aside from white matter changes, whatever that means. But other than that, he wasn't alarmed. It seemed clear. So I think I'm good to go. She said, well, I think you should get a neck MRI. And thank God she was able to order it, and she got it. And then radiology report read that it was, there was something in my spinal cord resembling of an MS lesion. And I could not believe I just was in disbelief. And I said, no, that has to be wrong. Like, there's no way. I was in complete denial and disbelief. And so she's like, I really think that this could be, I'm not diagnosing you. I really think that you could really have MS, and you need to follow up with neurology. So I found a neurologist. He was kind of far away, but he was less wait because they all have like a long wait time.
Sad.
It is. It's very sad. So I found this neurologist. He did a whole new panel of MRIs. And he's like, well, you haven't had a brain MRI since that incident in 2017. So let's have a redo of your brain MRI. And if that's clear, like, you should be okay. Like, I'm not too worried about this thing in your neck. And the brain MRI comes back with MS lesions, like they said it was like clear as day MS lesions. Well, I didn't want to hear that. I was, well, first of all, my immediate reaction was like, I thought my life was over. I thought this was a death sentence, but that I was also it was like this dichotomy of like, oh my God, this is a death sentence. But also no way. Like, I'm not accepting that. I'm going to a new doctor.
Yeah.
Because I wanted a different answer.
Yeah.
So I switched neurologists. I go to someone closer to me, just praying, crossing my fingers that different doctor, different set of eyes, that it would be a different answer. And it was the same answer. He did a new set of MRIs, and it was even like more lesions. And he was like, this is definitely MS lesions. He's like, but obviously I can't diagnose you till you get a spinal tap. I got the spinal tap. It confirmed it. Now, in between those two doctors, I was accepting that this could possibly be really MS. And so I was doing like cautionary research. And I did come across Dr. Terry Walls, who's amazing. She recovered from, I think, secondary MS, and which is even more serious than what I had, which is RRMS, relapsing remitting. And she was in a wheelchair. And so she was like my first glimmer of hope that something can be done dietary wise to help this.
Yeah.
And I started implementing a lot of her stuff, but her stuff is still very plant heavy, and no diss to her whatsoever, because what she does works for her. But I found it to be difficult for me. I did drop gluten right away, but without doing enough research and having enough education, I still would go down the gluten-free aisle and buy the gluten-free packaged stuff, which is loaded with junk and seed oils. And I hadn't learned about that yet. So I still was not that great. And then a funny thing happened one night. I had a lot of bedridden days and weekends where I would just lay there and cry out, and sometimes just cry out to God, like, please, like, please help me, because I cannot live like, I felt like I was a prisoner in my body. I really did. The symptoms were so depressive and so oppressive to my brain that I just felt like I would describe it to my parents and my husband, like, I feel like my brain is disintegrating, but I'm consciously aware of it. I don't even have the luxury of being like out of it and not knowing what's happening to me. Like, I'm so hyper aware that my brain cannot function. And I really started to malfunction at work really bad, even on an amphetamine. It was bad. It got really bad. And I remember laying in my bed several times because I was bedbound a lot in my off time. And I would just lay there and look at the ceiling and be like, this can't be my life. Like, please, God, send me something. Like, please help me. Send me a sign. Send me something I need to do to make my life better, because this can't be my life. If this is my life, I want out.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a notification on one of my Facebook groups that I was in, because I had asked a question in there about if like something, I think it was like a low dose naltrexone group, and it's like a medication that's an anti-inflammatory. And I was like, oh, asking around, like maybe this would help me. So I asked a question in there, which had been months ago, and I asked if this had helped anybody with MS. And months later, this girl somehow saw that question, which I'm like, blows my mind, because it was months ago. And some girl answered it and said, you should really look into the carnivore diet, because it has a tremendous amount of success with MS, and you should look up Emily Penton. She has MS, and she's a big carnivore that, has like, she's doing great and no medication. And I was like, wow, oh my gosh, something like a light bulb went off that night. And as soon as I read that and digested it, it was like a light bulb went off. And I felt like, why do I feel like this is the answer that I was crying out for? And I went down the research rabbit hole of that. I found her success story. I found all these other success stories I found. And as I'm researching everything in the carnivore world, it's like everything was flooding into me, like, duh. Like, now it all makes sense. Like, this is what I've been missing. And of course, like, this is ancestrally more appropriate. Like, this is evolutionary, more appropriate. Like, everything was making, I'm like, I was trying to heal from plants, but like, we did not evolve from just eating plants, like, duh. No. And so, yeah, it's like all the light bulbs started going off, and it just made so much sense. And so I went, that very next day, I went carnivore. And awesome. And I mean, I started off small, just like I would wake up, eat bacon and egg, just whatever I could that was animal foods, and evolved from there. And I have to say, within days of going carnivore, I noticed a lift in the brain fog and a lift in my mood. And that was such a motivator for me to keep going. And it wasn't perfectly uphill. I mean, there was some bumps in the way. I definitely did an oxalate dump, so it wasn't perfectly uphill. There was some obstacles to get through, but I would do it all over again to get to where I am now.
Yeah. And isn't it amazing? You've read Sally Norton's book, I guess.
So I know about her, and I've seen a lot of interviews with her. I did not read her book, but I've seen a lot of her interviews and YouTube videos about oxalates.
Yeah. She's a rock star, first of all. Yeah. And if you don't have the book, you should definitely get it. Like, I just listened to it while I'm out walking or something. But so you've seen a lot of stuff. And so even without reading the book, you can see how this happened, right? You can see how this happened to you and why it happened, right? Why you got so sick. It's amazing, right?
It blows my mind. It really blows my mind. And it's within the first few months of starting to see all these glimmer of hopes and seeing some subtle changes, it sparked such a passion in me to, like, I just knew I was going to get better and better. And I knew the only way I could accept a diagnosis like that anyway was to make a purpose out of it. So I promised myself that I was going to do whatever I could to get through this and come out better on the other side, and I will make a purpose out of it. And I got last year I got certified for health coaching, and so I just want to help as many people as I can, because I hate how many people are still stuck in the place that I was, where you felt so hopeless. You're trying all these things, all these detoxes, all these juices, all these smoothie, all these different remedies. I was on a million different supplements when I was plant-based, like so many supplements, and always hoping that next thing would be the game changer, and nothing was until I went carnivore. That was the game changer.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. And I'm like you. Once I realized the benefits of it, I couldn't believe more people weren't talking about it. I couldn't believe my
Yeah.
doctor never told me about it. I couldn't believe that so few people know about the benefits of this and how well it can make you. So I'm with you. I think the more people we tell, the healthier people are going to be, because I know that it sounds crazy. That's the thing, is I know it sounds crazy. Believe me, I know. And that's how I start with people, like, this is going to sound crazy. But
Mhm.
you ever heard of this? Like, doesn't it make
Yeah.
sense that it's sugar and carbohydrates and seed oils that are causing the inflammation that's leading to your sicknesses? Autoimmune diseases are caused by inflammation, and people just don't believe me. It's so hard to get that point across to people.
Oh, you're preaching to the choir here,
I
because
know.
I mean, I've literally even put in MS groups on there's groups for
Hmm.
on Facebook for I've even put in these groups, like when when people make a comment that really touches my heart and makes me feel horrible, because they talk about how bad they're suffering and what, like, the flare that they're going through and how depressed they are, and
Yeah.
I know what that feels like. The depression and the,
Hmm.
even this is, the contemplating of your life, like, that's real. Like, I really went through that, I hate seeing it, because I know it could get better if they attempted this. And I'll sometimes comment on those posts and say, try this. I've got so much better. I was just as depressed, and it goes by the wayside. Like, nobody care. It's a little sad. It's a little disheartening, how little people will believe in this. Like, if I'm like telling you, I'm one of you. I have MS too,
Yeah.
and
But the
I
thing
got
is,
better.
right. But the thing is, and this is one of the things that bothers me the most. I was going to say annoy, but that's not the right word. It's so frustrating, though, because if I told those same people about a juice fast, they would do it.
Yeah,
If I told those
yeah,
same people about a few supplements that made a difference, they would do it. They would hop on it and they would buy those supplements. If I told those same people, that something I saw an infomercial for, adding greens to your food or something like that, they would jump on it.
yeah.
Plant-based, but they would jump on it.
Oh yeah.
Vegetarian, they would jump on it. But you tell
Mhm.
them to only eat meat, eggs, and some dairy, and they're like, what? Why would I do that? Like, so that's what bothers me the most about it, is it's so frustrating because those same people have jumped on the juice cleanses. They have jumped on the vegan, right? They've
Mhm.
jumped on it, but you tell them about carnivore and they just think it's so crazy that they won't even try it. And
Right.
this is how close they are to finding healing. Like,
Mhm.
literally, they are 2 days away from feeling
Yeah.
better. In most cases, in a lot of cases, they are 48 hours away from
Yeah.
waking up and feeling better than they do right now. Most people are 48 hours away, not just people who are sick with MS, people in
Yeah.
general are
In
48
general.
hours away from feeling better, from
Yeah.
their joint pain being gone, from sleeping better,
Yeah.
from their mood being better. And there is a transition period for a lot of people. You have
There
like
is.
where you're tired but
Yeah.
ultimately, as far as brain fog lifting and feeling better, you're just a few days away from that if you would just give it a try, right?
I know, it's true.
It's so hard.
It's so frustrating, but I am guilty of it, because when I was in the vegan world and the plant-based world, and I would follow all the YouTube counts, and there was always, like, um videos of, like, on YouTube. There was always, like, the YouTubers were kind of the carnivores, and I'd never heard of carnivore until I was plant-based and vegan, because the vegans would often attack the carnivore accounts,
Hmm.
so
Yeah.
I would see, like, these battles, and I'd be like, what? And I'd be like, carnivore? Like, what's that? Like, carnivore, where you only eat meat? And so I was like, wow, when I look back, I have to admit, like, I was guilty of that too, being like, that sounds crazy,
Yeah.
because because the mainstream really pushes more plant,
Of
more
course.
fruits and vegetables, and lean, only lean protein. They tell you to stay away from red meat.
Mhm.
So I remember back in those days looking at carnivore things and some of these carnivore people in accounts and thinking that sounds crazy. Carnivore, like, eating mostly red meat and bacon, that sounds so unhealthy.
Right.
And so I can at least, I I I feel like, if I can reach these people because I was one, maybe, they'll relate to me more. I don't know, but I try my best to let people know, like, I don't come in with judgment, but you know, that I was there and I only got sicker. And if you find yourself getting sicker, you know, please consider animal-based, consider carnivore, because it was a game changer for my life. And so many other things healed that I didn't even expect to heal. Like my periods are so much, my menstrual cycle is so much easier. And it went from being very abnormal and all over the place. Like I used to like get very scattered periods. It was never on like a regular 20, 30-day cycle. I'm now like every 28 days. So it's on time and it's no pain. Half the time I don't even know I have it. Whereas I used to have so much period pain, I could never get through a cycle without having a heavy dose of, you know, Tylenol or Advil or whatever. And now I never need that for that. So that my acne cleared up. I had scalp psoriasis, and that was after I went really, like when I was doing all the juicing, I developed scalp psoriasis. So how could this be? I'm juicing, I'm healthy.
And it takes so long to realize what you're doing wrong. Like you can't imagine. And that's what people say to me, how can fruits and vegetables be bad for us? Like it's hard when you're in the moment and you're doing that.
Yeah.
You're guzzling the juices and it's so hard to imagine that it might be causing harm.
Oh yeah. The programming is so real. Like you're programmed to think like, no, like whatever is planted on the earth has to be good for you. Like even my father's a great example. Like he, you know, I try to get him to be I'm trying to push both my parents to be more animal based, and he cannot give up bread. And his reasoning is like, well, it's a grain, it's a plant, like wheat is grown from the earth. How could that be bad for you? And I was like, right there, like that's like a perfect example of the programming that we're just brought up to think that all the plants are healthy.
Yeah, when people say that to me, I say, but the plants that we have now are not the plants from the Bible. The things that we have now are not the original plants that we had. And we didn't have access to them like we have now. They would come across, before we had industrial agriculture, they would come across a patch of something and they would eat it. And then they would walk and they would hunt and they would eat meat. And then they would come across another patch of something. That's how we survived, was eating meat that could satiate us and fuel us and give us the nutrients we needed to get through several days until we could find more meat, you know. And the fruits and vegetables we have now are not the same ones we had then. They have been genetically modified. They are all, you know, filled with pesticides and poison. You can't, it's almost impossible. Even things that are organic, you would like to think that they're completely clean, but even things that are organic are not completely clean typically. You know, they come from something that's genetically modified, or something that was genetically modified so long ago they don't even realize that it was genetically modified. And so really ultimately, you know, unless we're making hybrid animals, you know, and things like that on purpose, you know, meat probably is the thing we should be eating, you know, and not lab grown meat, actual real meat. So what does a typical day of eating look like for you now?
So my eating on carnivore has greatly evolved. I started off because I just come off the blood sugar roller coaster. So I was still very, you know, you're more hungry. My hunger signals were all screwed up. So I would wake up very hungry in the beginning, and I would eat just beef, bacon, and eggs mostly. So it was mostly like beef, bacon, eggs, and seafood. And I would eat more of like a breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I would even bring some stuff like pre-made, like ground beef to work, because in case I got hungry, because I was so used to being on the blood sugar roller coaster, where I would start to fade and I would need something to pick me back up.
Yes.
I've now graduated and evolved to intermittent fasting, and I feel like that's been awesome for me. But I do it with I do like a fat fast. Like I don't just like dry fast. So I do like an eating window of like anywhere from like 12 to 6 or 1 to 6. I try to keep it a little before 6, give or take. So I'll start off with a coffee with a lot of ghee in it. So like the fat is what helps sustain me I don't think I'd be able to fast without it. Maybe I could now, because I've trained my body for fasting now. But that was a huge needle mover too for me. I feel like, with just being able to train my body to like energy and and sustain like my brain awakeness. So I do a coffee in the morning with a lot of ghee in it, and some MCT oil for the energy, and that holds me over. And then you're gonna laugh. You're gonna think I'm a little crazy because a lot of days. So when I first learned about Dr. Terry Wall, she was talking about the benefits of organs. So she did introduce me to that. And I was like, man, okay, apparently I got to start liking organs. And then fast forward to when I got into the carnivore education, they were also talking about how healthy organs. I really got to learn about how beneficial organs would be. And I felt so desperate to get organs into me. So I order a ground organ mixture. It's kidney, liver, and heart. It's like a ground beef mixture. US Wellness Meats, they're awesome.
Okay, yeah.
And so I get that delivered regularly. And I also learned about the benefits of raw meat if you're trying to heal from something serious. For me, now I don't tell other people you have to do this, never. But for me, because of how desperate I was to heal, I figured out a way to get into my system raw organs and raw meat. And I basically make like a smoothie out of the raw meat mixture, raw ground organs and raw meat. And so it's a little bit of wild blueberries in there I put, and kefir, raw goat kefir I use. And believe it or not, the kefir and the tiny little bit of wild blueberries, it really masks it so well. And I'm going to sound totally crazy for saying this. People are going to think I'm nuts.
No, they're not.
But I really like the taste. I actually like it. So it's so satiating. It's so filling. So I actually have that raw meat blend most of my days, like almost, when I'm traveling, I obviously can't have that, but I have that a lot of days, especially as a teacher. I bring that to work with me. It's like my on the go thing. So that's basically my lunch. If I don't have that, if I haven't packed that, I just eat whatever fatty meat and eggs I have on hand. So a lot of fatty lamb, a rack of lamb, a lot of ribs. I prepare ribs and lamb every week for like lunch preps. And then same thing for dinner. For dinner, just the fattiest meat I can find. A side of eggs and bacon, like eggs, like no longer do I have like a side of potatoes and a vegetable. My new sides are bacon and eggs.
Right. So meat with a side of meat.
Meat with a side of meat and eggs. Yeah. Yes. And seafood. I love seafood, like wild caught, obviously.
So the smoothie thing caught me off guard. I was thinking, that's not weird. So many people eat organs. I'm so glad you're incorporating those, until you hit the smoothie part. But I'm intrigued. I think it's awesome that you figured out. I know, but I think it's awesome that you figured out a way to do that and make sure you get those in. So I applaud you. I think it's awesome. I think it's wonderful.
Thank you. It's weird, and people are probably gonna be like, ew, like what a creature. But I try to remind people, you don't understand how desperate I was. Like, please understand, I was completely desperate to heal. So I figured out a way to get those nutrients into me because I wanted to be on the fastest track of healing. When I tell you I was desperate, like I would have eaten dog poop if it meant that I was going to be healed. Like, that's how desperate I was to get out of the situation I was in. Because I truly felt like a prisoner in my body.
Yeah. I am so glad that you were feeling better, and so glad that you were doing better. And I really appreciate you taking the time to be with me today. I mean, I think your story was so insightful for people, and so many people, I think, women especially, can resonate with the juicing thing and the celery juice and the smoothies, the green smoothies. And so many people, that resonates with us because that's what we feel like is going to make us healthy. And then it just makes it worse. So thank you so much for sharing your story.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And I do want to follow up with my neck thing, because in case anybody's I did find a doctor in New York State that did validate some of my red flags about the neck, and he did give me what's called an atlas adjustment, where it's no cracking. He did some sort of tap thing, and I do also think that plays into my wellness. I feel like it helped. So, but the carnivore diet was the I mean, that is my life changing. I'll never look back.
Yeah, me too.
I could never look back. This is my way of life now, and I love it.
Yeah. That's amazing. Tell everybody where they can find you.
Yeah. Instagram, Beef Body Healing. I literally just set up a YouTube and a TikTok account. I'm so in the infancy stage of that. I really got to figure that out and learn how to do it. I would love to do a podcast. I got to figure, if anybody's watching that knows how to do a podcast, feel free to help me out. But I'm just getting started on those, and that's the same handle, Beef Body Healing. I posted a couple shorts on each of those, and I hope to get started with some more content on that because I really want to reach people.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Colleen. This was really great.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
And thank you for watching. We'll see you next time on the Carnivore Revolution.